Imagine you are put on trial for a crime you didn't commit, and the sentence is death.
Imagine being tried over and over, and each time you get sent back to death row. That's what happened to the 9 young men in this photo. In the midst of the Great Depression, 9 black boys hawked the Southern Railway line from Chattanooga to Memphis, Tennessee, along with several white men and 2 white women. A fight broke out among the white and black boys. After kicking several of the white men off the train in Stevenson, Alabama, the train kept moving. An armed mob stopped the railways, and the 9 black men were arrested for raping Victoria Price and Ruby Bates.
Eight of the 9 boys were sentenced to death. The remaining man was 12-year-old Roy Wright, for whom the prosecution agreed not to seek the death penalty for because of his age. March 24, 1932. The Alabama Supreme Court upholds the convictions of 7 of the boys. One of the youngest, Eugene Williams, is granted a new trial. May 27, 1932. The U.S. Supreme Court announces it will hear the Scottsboro cases. November 7, 1932, in the Patterson v. Alabama case, the U.S. Supreme Court reverses the convictions. The court rules that the defendants were denied the right to counsel, which violated their rights to due process under the 14th Amendment. The cases are remanded to the lower court. On March 25, 1933, Ruby Bates testified that neither she nor Victoria Price had been raped on the Southern Railway. January 23, 1936, Haywood Patterson was convicted and sentenced to 75 years in prison. In July 1937, Clarence Norris was convicted of rape and sentenced to death. Andy Wright was convicted and sentenced to 99 years. Charlie Williams was convicted and sentenced to 75 years. Uzi Powell was convicted of assaulting an officer and was sentenced to 20 years. All charges against Roy Rice and Eugene Williams were dropped on account of young age at the time of the crime. The charges against Olin Montgomery and Willie Robertson was also dropped on the grounds that the state no longer believed the men to be guilty. Life after 1938. Charlie Williams is paroled in 1943. Clarence Norris is paroled in 1944 and leaves Montgomery, violating his parole. Norris is returned to prison a couple of months later. Once released, he again jumps parole. In 1989, Norris, the last surviving Scottsboro boy, dies at age 76. Andy Wright is also paroled in 1944 and leaves Montgomery, violating his parole as well. Wright is returned to prison a year later and is paroled in 1950. Uzi Powell is paroled in 1946. Haywood Patterson escapes from prison in 1950. In 1951, he is convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 6 to 15 years in prison in Michigan. After serving less than a year of his sentence, Patterson dies of cancer in prison. In 1959, Roy Wright returns from a career in the United States Army and is a merchant marine. Convinced his wife has been cheating on him, Wright shoots his wife and then commits suicide.
What Scottsboro teaches us is that you cannot underestimate the power of our history as it relates to race, as it relates to poverty, as it relates to sectionalism in the struggle for justice.